Welcome to Stories from Asia. Today's guest is John Ang, and we talk about bringing innovations to Malaysia, Malaysian work, culture, and proverbs used in Malaysian language. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you for the warm introduction and invitation to the show, Lucas. I truly appreciate the opportunity to engage here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Can you give us a brief overview of your career and what you currently do?
Well, I have worked for the past 20 years. Of course, I started off as an engineer back in my first job. I slowly moved towards a different role year after year. I've been pretty much engaged with areas like clinical marketing, channel management. I think to the extent now, in the last 10 years, I've been focusing mainly in general management role. So I've joined Get Healthcare in the past 3 years now. I'm responsible for building the Malaysian market.
Let's start off with your newest groundbreaking technology for prostate cancer you introduced to Malaysia. 1 in 8 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer in their lifetime. So, this is truly a life saving technology that you're bringing to the country. How do you plan for launching a product like that in Malaysia, and what challenges did you have to overcome?
It's definitely important for our listeners here to have a regular health check, regardless of age. I think for us at Get Healthcare, we are committed to bringing the solutions that kind of addresses the evolving needs of the market that we serve. And cancer, particularly prostate cancer, remains a huge challenge and, of course, a sensitive topic. And when I look at the latest data from the National Cancer Registry, I think prostate cancer ranks among the top 10, and that accounts for probably about 3.8% of the total cancers recorded throughout 2023. I think if you look at just in terms of the incidences, it kind of boils down to about 9.3 out of every 100,000 male in Malaysia that are at risk of developing prostate cancer. So, on the technology that you have mentioned, we have recently introduced in Malaysia the irreversible electroporation, or in short, IRA therapies. It's not a new concept, at least not to us in Asia Pacific region. And I think over the past decade, we have, as a company, collaborated closely with healthcare professionals to strengthen the clinical data supporting this treatment. This significant effort that was led by the Australia team at Get Healthcare has been instrumental in allowing us to introduce this groundbreaking technology into the Malaysian market. Launching novel and relatively new technology in our market definitely has its own set of challenges, given that the established dominance of more cost-effective and widely available Malaysian technologies in the market. The challenge that we face, of course, is the absence of sufficient expertise to train the healthcare professionals in ASEAN region, and that can add another layer of complexity. We firmly believe that the benefit of this technology far outweighs these challenges. We work closely with various stakeholders, especially in the resources that we can get, and work closely with our business partners, especially the manufacturers themselves, together with our colleagues in Australia, to bring in key opinion leaders, ensuring that this healthcare professional receives the education and training needed to help them to adopt innovative cancer treatment in the country.
You have a successful career of over 20 years working in Malaysia and across the region as well. For Malaysia, can you share with us some of the specifics of working in the country and how you have learned to factor those into your management style, into your day to day?
Well, I think the real success that I've had lies in having the opportunity to contribute to the healthcare market. I have the privilege of serving both local and international. It has been incredibly rewarding, especially when we face with the challenges of introducing new therapies or products that perhaps have the potential to change the way healthcare professionals and providers deliver treatment and care to the patients. I think over the last 2 decades, Malaysia's healthcare landscape has undergone a significant transformation. While we may not be the most populous country in the region, with just a little over 34 million people, both our public and private healthcare systems are well, or rather have been well established when compared to the other countries in the ASEAN region. The expectation for growth as a vendor in Malaysia can sometimes present its challenges, I think particularly when negotiating terms or offers with manufacturers based on the size of our addressable market. But having said that, as a developing country, Malaysia has navigated the shares of political changes over the past few years and the currency fluctuation as well. But nevertheless, I think this is a considerable room for growth, and the Malaysian population is well supported by the robust healthcare system, complemented by the insurance coverage. Both the public and private sectors are actively working to expand and improve access to the healthcare facilities. I think this is an ongoing commitment to the healthcare infrastructure that positions Malaysia for continued growth and innovation in the sector.
You mentioned your currency and you mentioned fluctuations, and that has been in the last close to 2 decades that I have been in Asia, a big factor in particular, the Malaysian market. How do you, as a business manager, hedge and manage that risk of currency fluctuations?
When it comes to that risk, we try to be a little bit more conservative when we plan our spending, especially when it comes to inventory purchases. We try to track the UCI what we think is going to happen, because I think the volatility is pretty unpredictable. There was a huge change in our currency. Unfortunately, at that time, our partner, the distributor, did not factor it well. So they have to take a hit in terms of margin. When it comes to our end, we usually take the higher side of what we see would be the risk and use that to plan our spending, plan our inventory purchases, as well as our price to the market. So that provides us with the room to navigate away from having to implement price increase, which is a very sensitive topic in Malaysia.
John, you've managed increasing sizes of teams for the bulk of your career. I'm quite curious about your thoughts in three core areas of people management in particular. Number one is managing difficult conversations with your Malaysian employees, building effective teams in Asia, and your view on foreigners that come into the country and operate in the country, collaborate with you, and how they can operate more effectively. So maybe let's take the first one, managing difficult conversations with your employees.
Well, I would say that I've managed a decent size of team throughout my career. It's interesting that you brought up this question. So when it comes to managing difficult conversation with employees, I think this definitely requires a certain level of attention, especially empathy, clear communication, as well as at least focus on solution. So when it comes to how I approach it, I think it's pretty simple. You got to be very prepared and calm. I think it's also important to understand that sometimes the situation is a little bit different. You got to have a thorough understanding before you address the issue. It's very important as a leader that you actively listen and allow the employee to kind of express their perspective fully. This helps to actually diffuse any emotional tension that may arise in a conversation. There are times that we have to be quite transparent and respectful. And most importantly, we have to focus on the facts, avoiding personal attacks, remain on a solution-oriented mindset. It's also crucial to maintain a respectful tone and ensure that employee understands that the goal of that conversation is to help them to improve or resolve an issue, but not to criticize them personally. In anything that we do, follow-up is definitely very important, because after the conversation, there's definitely a need to ensure there's a plan in place for improvement or resolution to provide a continuous feedback. I think regular check-ins is also quite important.
I have a quick follow-up here on the concept of saving face. Do you have that in Malaysia as well? Do you experience that in the Malaysian culture, or is that something that maybe is not that visible?
There is perhaps some level of saving face culture here, but I guess that we can't run away from having to tell the truth. We try to address it with the concept of saving face rather than being too direct that might be perceived differently. We don't know how they think. We just have to assume a very neutral position and try not to be emotionally attached when we make any comments.
And what you mentioned earlier is quite relevant about sticking to the facts. It's just maybe important, how do we present these facts in certain situations? Western cultures tend to be very direct, to the point, and sometimes in Asia, this can be lengthened out a little bit or smoothened and presented in a different way. Let's go to the next part of this question, which is building effective teams in Asia. What are your views on that?
Well, building teams in Asia, or maybe Malaysia specifically, we require a certain understanding of the cultural diversity. As a Malaysian, we are quite fortunate because we are immersed in different layers of culture. That helps us to understand the communication styles that we need to deploy, and understanding the work ethics across the region, and that helped us to understand a few other things. So when it comes to cultural sensitivity in Asia, I've seen it in different places where it kind of varies in terms of hierarchy as well as respect that each of this person would need. One general example, in most Asian cultures, differences to seniority is definitely important, and teamwork often needs to account for this. Anyone who kind of works here would have to ensure that they adapt the style to be more respectful to these cultural, I would say, nuances. In Asia, or maybe perhaps I think same to the other region, we have to ensure that we foster collaboration. I think this is very important, that we create an open environment where ideas are freely shared. Collaboration is also encouraged to ensure there's a key performance in a high-performing team. So this is important as we create a safe space for everyone to contribute and to ensure that every team member's voice are heard. Of course, this is something which is very relevant. Everyone comes with a different skill sets, and everyone comes with the diverse background, especially when you put in the cultures in place. So I think it's very important that we have to recognize each individual's strengths and bring those skills together for a common goal. It's also good to encourage mutual respect and appreciation of differences that create more cohesive team.
You mentioned common goal. I think that's worthy of a follow-up here. How do you communicate in your team's common goals?
Well, I would say we communicate it very openly. I would also take the opportunity to hear their feedback after delivering this message on our common goals. Allow them to understand that we are in a journey together. We are in the same boat together. We have to strive and work hard together to reach the goal that we need, especially I think when it comes to delivering the expectations of our stakeholders as well as a company.
Let's close with the final part of that three-part question, which is your view on foreigners coming into Malaysia and how they can do better and be effective in the country.
The most important part here is that the foreigners have to understand the culture. They have to adapt to the culture itself. Coming to work in Malaysia, we have a rich mix of ethnicities as well as culture, where we have Malay, Chinese, Indian, and other ethnicities. It's also good to understand the local customs, language, and communication styles. I would say foreigners have to make an effort to learn about Malaysia's cultural norms, be a little bit more respectful to them. And it's also important to build relationships. A lot of times in businesses is often built on relationships. Taking the time to engage with local colleagues, understand their work ethic, and building trust is definitely very crucial. Foreigners can benefit from taking a more patient, relationship-driven approach to business rather than being too direct or bringing in their own cultures into the country to some extent. And when it comes to the communication styles, we can sometimes be a little bit indirect compared to some foreigners might be used to, especially when it comes to addressing disagreements. At times, we don't take things head on and we can address it in a very indirect way. Understanding these subtleties, adapting to the communication style can actually help to prevent misunderstanding and improve collaboration.
That's a very good point. I want to touch on briefly on what you said earlier about building relationships. So, in different countries and cultures in Asia, you build relationships differently. Now, sometimes this is related to going out in the evening, making deals during lunch or during dinners. How do you build effective relationships in Malaysia? What are the environments where relationships are built?
Well, sometimes this skill set varies from people to people. But I would guess that in order to be very successful in building relationships, one has to be very genuine. You have to be very sincere when it comes to communication. Sometimes people tend to forget that they have to have the openness and sincerity when it comes to communication. There are times when people become too formal. The relationship would have a certain limitation that you can actually achieve. So in my practice, we try to be very sincere, be very open, and try to listen a little bit more rather than trying to drive things through when relationship is actually both ways. It's not just only one way. Taking a little bit more effort to understand the person a little bit better, or rather their preferences, would add a little bit more mileage to it.
That's a very good and important point that you're making, that in order to achieve your business goals, you sometimes need to take a step back and focus on people, on building trust. And I love what you said about sincerity. One of the most important traits, I believe, in Asia is to build sincerity and through that trust with our partners. Quick sideways question, John. What about Malay proverbs? Do you have one or two that you could mention to us that the Malay language has on offer? I always find that proverbs are something unique to a culture, yet at the same time, most cultures do have similar ones. So, do you have one or two?
There's a proverb that I think is very important that everyone should have. It sounds like this, right? Harimau mati meninggalkan belang, manusia mati meninggalkan nama. It tells you that a good person leaves a lasting impression and when they die, while a bad person leaves a negative legacy. So that's how it sounds. So this program actually helps to encourage people to do good until their last breath. This is what I believe in as a human being.
That's very valuable. Would you be able to give us the translation from Malay to English?
I mean, the direct translation sounds like this: Tiger dies, living stripes. Human dies, living names.
Oh, that's interesting. Obviously, tigers in Malay cultures have a very deep meaning, right? There's a thread throughout Malay culture. So it's quite interesting that the proverbs obviously also include tigers. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, let's get to the final two questions. First, how do you see the near-term economic future of Malaysia?
I would say that the near-term economic futures of Malaysia does have its challenges and opportunities. And my thoughts when it comes to opportunity, we are considered a very diversified economy, ranging from manufacturing right down to perhaps be agriculture and digital industry. All this are well positioned for growth. Key sectors like electronics, palm oil, and also the oil and gas are expected to remain strong contributors to our economy here. Malaysia has also recently actively promoting digitalization and innovation, especially with the initiatives, I'm not sure if you've heard of it before, like the Malaysia Digital Economy Blueprint. This definitely will help to open up new opportunities for technology-driven industries like fintech, e-commerce, as well as digital infrastructure. We are strategically located in Southeast Asia. The strong trade relationships that we currently have with global partners like China and the US and some of the ASEAN countries provide some sort of avenue for international trade, particularly in, say, manufacturing exports as well as raw material. Challenges are plenty. Even as a vendor, the global economic uncertainty, like many other countries, we are very vulnerable to external economic factors, such as fluctuations in global commodity prices, trade disruptions, as well as geopolitical risks, where we've seen where this actually affects how we are able to get or rather source the finished goods to Malaysia. In labor market and talent development, we definitely face this challenge in upgrading our own workforces. I think to meet the demand of digital economy, I think there's a need to invest in continuous education, upskilling, and we have to create a talent pool that's adaptable to the changing job landscape. Something that all of us can run away from: inflation and cost of living, particularly with food and fuel prices, which is a challenge for Malaysia. It affects consumer spending and also put pressure on lower income groups. In order to be able to be sustainable, we have to make sure that we manage this to provide economic growth that's very crucial to us. And the last bit here, political stability. It can be very uncertain. Sometimes can also create instability in our market. Maintaining a stable government and policy will definitely help to continue to foster investor confidence and sustain a long-term economic growth for the country.
John, let's close. What would you suggest to someone considering a relocation to Malaysia? What should they think about and how can they immerse themselves in the culture? What are your recommendations here?
Well, it is very interesting. I think relocating to Malaysia is definitely an exciting opportunity for anyone to experience that. But it's important to approach the book with some thoughts to ensure that you have a smooth transition and at least partial or full immersion into the local culture. Some of the things you got to take note is probably the cultural diversity, where Malaysia is a multicultural country which is rich in mix of different ethnic groups. Each group has its own languages, tradition, and religious practice. So it's definitely important to learn a little bit more about the customs and tradition. This gives that person an understanding and respect to the cultural diversity. And you likely encounter at least some blends between Malay, Chinese, and Indian in a daily life. It's also to understand the key religion. I'm not sure if you know, Islam is our key religion in the country. But Malaysia is also home to Buddhists, Christians, and Hindus, and others. Be aware of religious holidays and practices which will help the person to navigate the social dynamics. Language is a consideration. While English is widely spoken, especially in the urban areas as well as a business setting, Malay is the official language in the country, and it's important to learn a little bit of these basic phrases in order to allow you to connect with the locals. Anyone who comes into here, you have to be very open to the local dialect. Depending on the regions that you're in, there might be some differences even in Malay language, but you can usually communicate in English in larger cities. The most interesting part for anyone that comes into Malaysia is the food culture. We are famous for its food. We always have the debate on whether we or Singapore has the best food, but as a Malaysian, I feel that Malaysia is definitely a better place for food. We have blends of different offers from Malay, Chinese, Indians. You have to try every local dishes and try to socialize through this food. Meal is definitely an often communal and social life in Malaysia, so we can't miss the opportunity to join in any food gatherings or festival. There are times that everyone has to adapt to the pace of life. I would say that we're a laid back lifestyle, but urban areas like Kuala Lumpur are fast paced. I would say a little bit more faster than anywhere else. But you have to be very patient with some bureaucracy, especially in processes in obtaining permits or approvals, which sometimes may take time. Patience is very important. You got to embrace the local rhythm. Work week is typically Monday to Friday. Weekends is pretty much a time where everyone will try to relax and engage in family and social activities. It's also important to know that public holidays can vary based on different ethnic or religious celebration. This is an interesting fact that in Malaysia we have different public holidays to address to different cultures and religions, which is a good thing. Reflecting to the initial questions on building relationship, this is the same thing here for any foreigners who come into Malaysia. You have to, at least at some point, be a little bit more respectful because as an Asian, there's definitely a need to address a different hierarchy or different culture. Networking is definitely important. But in order to immerse yourself in the local people, you got to engage in community activities. I think volunteering, participating in any local events can help you understand the Malaysian society and definitely meet new people.
Yeah, and to be part of the community, absolutely an important aspect to immerse yourself into the culture. Quick follow up, Ronnie Chiang, how much did he do for Malaysian culture?
I didn't even know that he's Malaysian until recently. Well, I can't say he has done much, but at least after knowing that he's Malaysian, I think we're quite proud of his success, and he definitely brings a lot of value to the country where you put Malaysia on the map. Because a lot of people still don't know where Malaysia is to some extent.
That's true. And I find every time I watch his shows, he is incredibly proud of being Malaysian. And I have had this feeling from you, from other individuals that I know in the country, a very strong pride about being Malaysian. And that is good. That is important. It is your culture. So you are proud of it. John, thank you very much for being with me here today.
Thank you, Lukasz. Thank you for the opportunity.
And thanks for listening to episode 3 of Stories from Asia. Follow us on the Edward Kaidansky Archive social media channels to learn more about cross-cultural competence in a real business context. Next week, I'm joined by Derek Tang, who will share his experience about working at Western versus Chinese companies. Have a great week ahead.